Hokie Hangover, Virginia Tech 37, Charlottesville College for the Performing Arts 17. Did you guys see the thing about Josh Fuga? Did you see the whole like back and forth?
Yes,
He
yes,
he
yes, I did.
posted, yeah, he posted essentially like the Spark Notes version in case you all didn't see the original post because Fuga went and deleted it. He posted something about the importance of senior day and trying to finish the right way, for a home game on senior day because some of his teammates weren't able to have their final home game in Lane Stadium against UVA a couple years ago, obviously because of the shooting that took place at UVA. Fuga's post had nothing to do with that. A bunch of UVA fans got in the mentions and essentially blew it up in a way that it just essentially took the tweet completely out of context. And all the UVA fans, like they like to do, like every fan base does, right? They all started piling on, piling on, piling on. And then Josh Fuga said, well, here's listen, like I'm not going to have people basically come after my character. So here's what I did in 22 in the wake of the shooting. I passed through Charlottesville on the way home for Thanksgiving, like I always do. I had my cleats and the gloves I was going to wear in the Virginia Tech UVA game that weekend in my car. I left them at the memorial, signed them, and put a nice message down with the numbers of the players, essentially in their memory. He got a letter from UVA athletic director Carla Williams because she was so touched by his tribute. So then UVA fans just looked like a bunch of idiots after that. Point being, I bring all this up just to say that it feels really good to beat Virginia again. And I know it's been a really disappointing season, and Virginia Tech finishes the regular season 6-6. Let me just mention that. Maybe more importantly, Virginia finishes the regular season 5-7. They are not going to a bowl game once again. So I just want to throw that out there. But as frustrating as it is that Virginia Tech had the season that they had, and I want to make sure we see the forest from the trees. It was a really frustrating year for Virginia Tech, but it is always good to beat UVA. It's good to go back to a bowl game. Those are good things, right? Even having the understanding that some changes need to be made, right, on the coaching staff, and status quo is not acceptable. And this is a really disappointing year. Beating UVA, man, it's better than the alternative. And by the way, that's 19 out of 20 and 23 out of the last 25, and it felt damn good.
Yeah, this was I actually spoke with someone about this game earlier today, and the way I've been categorizing this was it was a relief, quite honestly. And unfortunately, I think we've used that term quite a bit when it comes to Virginia Tech playing Virginia, because let's be honest, the gap, at least on paper, has not really been that large between these two teams over the last decade or so. But every year, it seems like Virginia Tech still finds a way to beat up on little brother. And Mike, you're absolutely right. It feels damn good every time it happens. It never gets old. Um, Glad that we didn't have any flag issues at at the 50-yard line in this game. That was an issue in some other rivalries this week. But that's what happens when you lose at home to your rival. Obviously, not the case for Virginia Tech on Saturday. We're gonna chop this up quite a bit, but as I mentioned on the preview, the game doesn't really have a huge impact on my big picture thought on this year. Um, but like you said, Mike, it's better than the alternative. And anytime you can beat up on Virginia, you're certainly going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, credit to Virginia Tech uh, and its fans for what looked
Yeah.
like a awesome atmosphere. I ultimately ended up opting out of going to the
Oh,
game, primarily because uh, of the mental calculus I made, which was I've been on the road for 8 days in the New York metropolitan area, uh, making public appearances, aka like hanging out with my friends and family.
what?
But beyond that, right? Like I thought third string quarterback, 25 degrees. I don't envision me leaving that game happy. Right? It would either be a sigh of relief or inexplicable anger were the two options. And perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps I was wrong. Like, I don't know if I regret my decision to not go just from a personal exhaustion standpoint and wanting to drive 3 hours. But I don't doubt that every Hokie fan in that stadium was having a ton of fun, despite the Lambeau Field-esque conditions that Lane Stadium brought. So, to those who were gutsier than I applaud you, and I applaud the players because this is something that we talked about and we've touched on. You know, amidst criticism, it has never seemed like the team has quit on Brent Pry. And it certainly didn't look like that yesterday evening. It looked like a group that, as much as like I thought going in, like Tech is finishing with a disappointing season no matter what. UVA has the opportunity to not only ruin Tech's season like beyond what anyone could have imagined, but really at the same time even make a bowl game, which would be more than most imagined for them. So the stakes of like ceiling and upside and positive vibes totally favored UVA. But it was Tech who came out with that youthful energy and looked like they wanted to be there. And UVA, quite frankly, did not. And it was evident all throughout. So probably the most fun Tech game to watch this year. If you look at the home slate, Boston College probably the only one that comes close. And yeah, I mean a good cap to a disappointing season. Doesn't change the 10,000-foot view picture, but as a guy who's on a podcast that loves to take the 10,000-foot view, sometimes it's good to just sit back and look right in front of you and what you just saw. And I'm not going to apologize for being happy because the team won.
Yeah, that's well put. We mentioned on the preview that this was going to be a situation where it was either going to be, much like you said, Andrew, either we're really, really upset with how it went, or we're relieved, essentially, that Virginia Tech pulled it out and is salvaging at least a bowl game out this really disappointing season, because it does not change the 10,000-foot view. It doesn't make me... We'll get into Pop Waza's play because he was outstanding. We'll get into the ins and outs of the game here in a second. It doesn't make me like any more optimistic for next season just because we beat UVA 37-17 at overmatch. We mentioned on the preview an overmatched UVA team. Like if Virginia Tech handled its business, this was going to be the outcome. That this is maybe not winning the game by 20 and jumping out to a 20-3 lead and having it at halftime, essentially having it never really be all that competitive. I didn't necessarily see that coming, kind of in the way that we saw last year where Virginia Tech hung 52 on UVA, and it was kind of a similar type game, to be truthful. But, we talked on the preview that, with the way UVA had struggled the second half of the year, Virginia Tech came out and played its best football, which we had only seen really a couple other times this year. We thought Virginia Tech would win this game and cover the spread, and that's exactly what they did. So this could have only been bad, right? Like the pendulum could have only swung in a really bad direction. Obviously, if you lose this game, you miss a bowl game, bad gets worse, disappointing season gets even worse.
Yeah.
Your disappointing season culminating with a bowl game is I would say the best possible outcome for as disappointing of a year as it was, right? Could obviously be way worse, losing to a rival, not going to a bowl game. You call yourself the flagship program in Virginia, all this stuff, and then you lose to a bad UVA team. That would be a really tough way to go out. So at least Virginia Tech went out the right way here in the regular season. We'll get one more game in the bowl. Let's talk about the game itself, right? I mean, this was pretty apparent early on. Virginia Tech had a really strong first drive, marched right up the field, scored a touchdown, got on defense, and then UVA tried a flea flicker, and Antoine Powell-Ryland was trying to just basically take Tony Muskett out of the game. Calandria took himself out of the game. Tony Muskett out of the game with the sack. That was a huge hit, and that kind of set the tempo, set the tone for the rest of the game and how the rest of the game would go. So I just thought it was a kind of a microcosm of this complimentary performance by Virginia Tech's offense and defense.
Pop Watson's performance to me obviously stood out. The fact that this kid was fresh off his essentially his debut, where he gets thrust into a game where he's going up against a very stout Duke defense and a very well coached team in Manny Diaz, and kind of was all over the place a little bit and showed some good, showed some bad. The fact that he gets 1 week of practice and is all of a sudden able to put together a 3-touchdown performance, not turn the ball over, really helped this offense move the ball both through the air and on the ground, hit on a couple deep throws, which is a huge part of this offense that has been missing for most of the season. I was just absolutely thoroughly impressed by what he did on Saturday. And I wrote my column that was published today, rickytheblue.com. You can go find it on my X as well. He has kind of cemented himself as the odds-on favorite to be the starting quarterback next spring. I can't envision a scenario where anyone that's currently on the roster beats him out, and that includes Kyron Drones. And I also don't envision a scenario where Brent Pry goes and brings in someone over top of him, given the overall potential that he has and the overall youth of this roster heading into next year. I think that this is going to be Pop's show, and I'm not saying that that's going to be really good moving forward, because we've obviously got a very small sample size, but it is really, really difficult to not be excited about what you saw on Saturday from a kid that, again, is still wet behind the ears at this.
My thought process throughout the game, right, was essentially sheer amazement with what I was seeing out of Pop Watson. And the question I kept asking, and I think I asked you guys, I think I asked, friends who are interested in the program, name a game this season where Kyron Drones played better than Pop Watson is playing right now. And you could grasp at straws and maybe say Miami.
Yeah.
But we saw what we saw. You can't blame the lying eyes at that point. Which, in an NIL world, that shakes you up a little bit, right? So you're paying one guy $1 billion, and essentially the third string guy can come off the bench and play better than him in the most important game of his life. I don't know if I agree with you, Ricky. I think there's a lot more that needs to be hashed out. And the reality is that if this is what Pop Watson was showing all year, and this is what he's capable of, and he was lodged into the third string without some sort of guarantee that he's going to be the starting quarterback, and especially now that he's put this on tape for the world to see, I wouldn't be incredibly surprised if he shops his talents elsewhere. Because if this was what he's capable of, and he was never even given second string snaps, I'd be like, these coaches are out to get me. And that's just the mind of a 22-year-old, right? Or not a 22-year-old, a 20-year-old. I don't know if it's all set in stone. And I don't know whether, obviously, Kyron Drones has eligibility left. He could come back.
I'm not saying anything is set in stone, Andrew. What I am saying is that based on the guys that are on the roster now, there's no shot that Watson isn't considered the top guy moving into next year.
So you think Kyron, Watson, in a world, I don't think this would happen, because I don't think the two stakeholders would allow it to happen, but in a world where it could, if it's Watson and Drones as 1 and 2 going into next year, and I said bet money on it, you'd bet on Watson.
Yes, and I would bet on Drones not being on the roster next season.
Okay, well,
I'm giving a theoretical where they're both on the roster.
Well, let me chime in because I think I fall somewhere in the middle. Like Kyron Drones this year did not, when he was healthy, he did not show or did not take the strides forward that we were hoping coming out of how he played at the end of last year, right? Okay, safe to everybody agree, right?
Yep.
One of his best games of the year was against Vanderbilt in the opener. He was one of only a couple games this year where he threw for over 200 yards. That was one of his better games of the year, was in the opener. Virginia Tech lost that game, right? And there were a lot bigger issues in that game than Kyron Drones. I just want to bring that up because that was one of his better statistical games, right? Obviously, he was banged up October onward. But before he got hurt, he was not playing particularly well. The offense as a whole was not playing particularly well. They weren't running the ball well. They weren't throwing the ball well. It wasn't going great, right? I think this offensive failure this year, I think a lot of it now in hindsight with the way Pop Watson looked on Saturday in particular and how he looked at times a week ago in the loss to Duke, I think that fans, not saying you, Ricky, because you're pretty level-headed, but I think the fan base, and I mentioned this on social media, I think the fans are getting a little out of control with this, right? Like, I'm really excited by what I saw out of Pop Watson on Saturday. It's really hard not to be. He had over 300 all-purpose yards in his first start and his first week that he really ever took first-team reps with Virginia Tech. I mean, he's been buried on the depth chart. And rightfully so, to be honest with you, because coming into the year, right, there was no reason why Kyron Drones shouldn't have been the unquestioned starter with the way he played last year. And we all agreed it made sense for Virginia Tech to go out into the portal and get a guy like Schlee, limited eligibility remaining, right, that, had some... Right, like basically tapped out, but wasn't going to block guys like Pop Watson in the future, right? If Drones were to leave for the NFL after this season, because that's a conversation we were having at the beginning of the year. So Schlee's addition made a lot of sense because we went into the year thinking, look, if Drones gets hurt, this team is going to be in a lot of trouble because we were all expecting Drones to play really well. And to be honest with you, Drones got hurt, and this team did struggle in the second half of the year, right? And I don't think it's necessarily because Drones was out of the lineup, but that was a contributing factor. It was one of your two key playmakers not being on the field, not being healthy. And we were really concerned about that prospect with Schlee not on the roster, a guy like Schlee. And Schlee came in and played well, right? When Drones was hurt, played well. So going into the year, Drones was the clear QB1. Schlee made a lot of sense as an experienced backup to bring in so that if Drones got hurt, you didn't have to go to a redshirt freshman who had played no snaps and totally tank what we thought was going to be a promising season with all the pieces you were bringing back. I think all that makes sense. Pop Watson was buried on the roster because he was a redshirt freshman, right? And this was a team full of experience. I think going into next year, this is where I think you make a really good point, Ricky. Going into next year, this is going to be a pretty young football team, right? And guys, and Andrew, to your hypothetical, and I'm not even sure you think this, you can chime in a second. I don't think Drones is going to be on the roster. I would be kind of surprised, right, with the way this year has gone. He didn't play great when he was healthy, and then he got hurt. I know they're paying him a lot of money. I don't know if they're going to be able or be willing to pay him the same amount of money considering what his performance was and what his availability was heading into next year, given all the holes they have on the roster going into next season in terms of veteran experience that they're going to be lacking at key positions like running back, wide receiver, corner. Like they got defensive line. They got some big holes to replace across the roster, and there are some young, promising guys that continue to play well. A lot of these guys that Pry has recruited, and that's the one feather I think in Brent Pry's cap is a lot of his young guys, a lot of the guys he's recruited are playing key roles on a veteran roster early in their careers, and they're looking good doing it. I do think that's a feather in his cap for all the criticism that we've given him, and rightfully so. the young guys are starting to play pretty well, and they're going to have sizable roles. Now, does that continue as their role increases? We'll see. But they're going to have to go portal shopping, right? And I don't know if they're going to want to pay Drones what they're paying him this year, right, to play moving forward. Does that mean Drones is part of the roster moving forward? We'll see. The one thing I'm willing to say, based on Pop Watson's performance on Saturday, is I don't think there is a scenario heading into the spring where Drones is the unquestioned QB1 if he comes back. I think Pop Watson has played well enough the last 2 weeks, small sample size, where you can evaluate whether or not Pop has a legitimate shot to be the starting quarterback next season. But again, it's a 1-game sample size against a bad Virginia team, right? And he played okay against Duke, not great, but it was also a tough situation, right? He was taking backup snaps to Colin Schlee heading into that week. Pry said after the game against Duke that Pop was screwing up the protections, which is not unexpected because he was not going into that week preparing as the starting quarterback. Colin Schlee was. But then he had the full week to prepare as the QB1 with the first team offense, and it looked a lot better, albeit against a very bad UVA defense. A lot of quarterbacks look good against UVA. So I just want to pump the brakes on Pop is the unquestioned quarterback one. I don't think that's necessarily the case if Kyron Drones comes back. I do think there should be an open competition for it, though, because I don't think Drones has played well enough this year to warrant that he is undoubtedly the guy next year if he sticks around. But I think all this is moot because I'm not sure Kyron Drones is going to want to come back and play with a bunch of young guys in this offense that he struggled in his second full year as the starter. I think he probably moves on. Also, the NIL piece, I think he's probably going to be taking a pay cut if I had to guess. So if he can go somewhere else and make the same money he made this year with a new opportunity with a veteran team, he might take somebody up on that offer. And we're recording here on Sunday night at 10 o'clock. Drones is not in the portal as far as we know. Maybe we hear something different by the time this podcast is released, and we'll react to that as it comes. But given the youth on the roster next year, how Pop has played, how Drones looked this year, all that stuff, if they are both here in the spring, I would love to see Pop Watson compete for the starting quarterback job next year because I haven't seen enough out of Drones this year to warrant that he's the guy unquestionably moving forward. That's where I'm at.
What's the market for Kyron Drones look like? I don't know if it's got to be a lateral move at best, right? Like no one is seeing what we saw over the course of the second half of the season, whether he was injured or not. He's not even just the second half of the season as a whole. It's not like a Hendon Hooker situation. He's going to go to Tennessee and start. At least in my view.
No, and I agree. I don't think he's going. That LSU offer that he had last time, not going to be there, right?
Would be pretty surprising. Yeah.
So no, I mean Andrew's right. Like at best, it's going to be a lateral move, but I don't think that given the way that this year ended with Watson playing most of the Duke game, and then playing all of the UVA game, playing as well as he did, I don't think that Drones is going to be able to beat out Watson in a competition, quite honestly. And Kyron is probably going to get an opportunity somewhere else where there is going to be an easier route to the starting job. And if it's for a relatively similar amount of money through NIL that Virginia Tech will offer him, then there really is no point in him sticking around. The other aspect of this, guys, is that this is his last shot. Right? He's got 1 year left to try and build a case for him to be able to play at the next level. He's not going to be able to build that case as a backup. So he's going to go wherever he thinks he's going to play. I just don't think that it's going to be here. And I just don't see a scenario, guys, in which Brent Pry goes out and finds someone that is going to slot in ahead of Pop Watson heading into spring practices. If anything, they would be 1-to-1, right? And they would be fighting it out. But I have a feeling that Brent is going to pitch to Pop Watson this winter because, like Andrew mentioned, he could have the opportunity to shop his services elsewhere. I would say that Pry is probably going to pitch him there is a high likelihood that you're going to be my starting quarterback in 2025. And this is what I can try and get you through NIL to make that happen.
That
Yeah, I mean, like,
conversation.
I would say reality is, right? Like, now that that happened, that game, just that one game is enough
You're not putting the
for
toothpaste
someone to
back
come
in
in.
the tube on this one.
Someone will come up to him and be like, "Here is money. You can start." The team that we played with Anthony Calandria now we're in the portal and Tony
Yeah.
Muskett clearly not being it. I'm sure they would take it. Like,
Well, yeah. Virginia would take a lot of guys from this roster.
Yeah, as they should, clearly. I I don't know from Pop's standpoint, right? I think given he's been in this offense now 2 full years, there seems to be a path for him here moving forward. Worst case, you're in a platoon, right, next year, and then you have a chance to basically do what Drones did to Grant Wells, right? That's like your worst case scenario here.
Yeah.
I think best case scenario, you're the unquestioned starting quarterback heading into next season. He made some throws.
Yeah.
And he made some throws that we had not seen against Duke.
He made some throws that we haven't seen from Kyron all season.
There was that throw he made to Jalen Lane on the post where he had a guy in his face and he put it like 40 yards in the air on a rope and hit Jalen Lane in stride. That is a big time throw. Capital B, big time throw. Like we had not, to your point, Ricky, we had not seen that this year out of Drones. We really, Virginia Tech's been missing the downfield element of their passing game. And, we talked about, Daquan Felton had been really just kind of had gone missing. And on the first drive of the game, he catches a deep ball and had 2 catches on that opening drive. Really didn't do a ton the rest of the evening, but he had the 2 big catches on the opening drive that set Virginia Tech's early touchdown. And Pop Watson was stretching the field vertically in a way that we really hadn't seen Drones do. Some things I worry about with Pop, and I'm not trying to rain on everybody's parade, some things I worry about, his height and his size, but he's very elusive and very quick. I think the running game is going to have to look different with him in the lineup, as we saw a bit last night against UVA when he had to run. It was more like scrambling on passing plays than design quarterback runs. He can do that, but I think the offense is going to look a lot different if it's Pop Watson under center a full season rather than Kyron Drones. Less quarterback power, obviously. Yeah. There is more shiftiness. You probably have some more. You probably have some more options in like the read option game, right? In terms of getting him outside the pocket and being able to do some things. I do worry about him at his size taking hits in the same way I worry about Castellanos at BC when he was there. It was kind of a similar thing. Do the hits just start to pile up across the course of a full season to the point where, he's going to be an injury liability if you take away his legs? Like, how effective is he going to be through the air? Those are the types of questions I have with Pop Watson, but he's got a swagger to him, and he's got the one thing that I think separates him from Drones, at least based on what I saw this season, is there is kind of like an unbreakability from a mental standpoint from Pop Watson. He has faced some early adversity here, thrown into the fire against Duke. Like I don't want to say he's not ready to play, because that would be unfair, because I thought he showed well against Duke given the circumstances, but you're running with the ones. You hadn't run with the ones all season, really, and now you're in against Duke, and you're playing 3/4 of the football game, trying to will Virginia Tech to a win. You faced a little bit of adversity against a good ACC defense, and you looked okay, and then you totally eviscerated Virginia on, basically a week's worth of prep as starting quarterback. I think he's past the first two test guys. I mean, the only way this would have been better is if Virginia Tech beat Duke. Like, he came in and Virginia Tech beat Duke. That's the only way this would have been better for him, I think.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I mean, the offense certainly will look different with him back there. But the thing that stood out to me the most was his ability to have that internal clock of knowing when he needed to escape the pocket and make something happen with his legs. This is something that we did not see from Kyron this year. It was something that showed up 2 years ago, or excuse me, last year in 2023, where Kyron seemed like he had that clock going right, and he was able to make some plays and extend drives. Pop Watson did that all night against Virginia. And when you have that kind of athleticism and the innate ability to know where that pressure is coming from, to know what your escape route is, you're going to move the chains a lot. And Pop Watson did that a ton on Saturday. And that is an element of a quarterback's game, especially at kind of this middle power four level, where you can really make things happen. Diego Pavia is someone that we obviously got to know very well earlier this year. That's the kind of quarterback that Diego Pavia is. And when you're not being able to recruit some of these 5-star QBs that are, straight out of central casting, they're 6'5", they're 230, they've got the giant arm, they're incredibly accurate. The quarterbacks that can improvise and escape are often the ones that are most impactful. And to me, Pop Watson has that trait. And if he can continue to develop that, I think he's going to make a very competent quarterback at this level. I don't think he's going to be an elite quarterback right at the Power 4 level, but Virginia Tech, I mean, that would certainly be nice, but Virginia Tech doesn't really need to have an elite P4 quarterback, right? You need to have someone that can move the chains, be competent, keep your offense rolling. I think that Pop can be that guy with a little bit more growth.
At the end of the day, and I don't disagree with much of anything that you said, either of you, it is a coaching staff who we can assume the head man will still be there. If not, we'll know that by tomorrow and probably be doing another podcast that makes this one moot.
Yeah. Would have known already, probably, to be honest with you.
We would have known already. Exactly. I bet you the offensive coordinator is still going to be there.
Yeah,
defensive
probably.
Coordinator is toast. So either way, the offensive coordinator and the head coach are going to be the same guys. They said, Pop Watson, your QB3. And yes, we saw him play a fantastic game against UVA and a formidable game against Duke. But the coaches that watch this kid every day in practice pick Kyron Drones. And not only do they pick Kyron Drones, they pick Schlee. Where if in their coaching minds, right, like they felt in their heart of hearts that Watson was better than Schlee, you'd put Watson ahead of Schlee. Like, there's no, like, ego that you have to worry about ruffling. It's a transfer fifth-year guy from the MAC. If he never plays a snap, he never plays a snap. They were intently planning on this guy never playing a snap. And in a world where I think they are going to try to get Drones back, and I think the dichotomy exists that seeing what we've seen out of Watson, the fact that he put that on tape, now everyone's seen it. All the other 100-some-odd FBS programs. These coaches are either going to have to, like, come in and say openly, which you can't really keep a secret, like, this is now a competition. Pop, say, here's a bunch of money. When at the same time doing what I think their intention will be, which is to recourt Drones, go for stability, go for year 3 on a guy that at least at some point you've had success with. I just don't see them. I can see why we think that. But I don't see these coaches who watch the kid practice every day turning on that far of a dime, knowing that that dime potentially risks drones returning, especially in what is ultimately going to be a make or break year for Brent Pry. It's the devil you know and the devil you don't. And I don't think Brent Pry, in a world where you can pick up a transfer quarterback, is too focused on anything beyond what he thinks gives him the best chance right away next year.
Yeah.
And all indications have shown from this year that he's much higher on Kyron Drones than he is on Pop Watson.
Yep.
So
I
he-
agree with that
essentially
too.
my thought.
I
my
agree
thought.
with that too.
Is he
I agree
much
with that
higher
too.
on Kyron Drones than Pop Watson, or is it that he gave Kyron Drones $500,000? And that's a move that you don't necessarily make without ruffling a ton of feathers in the locker room.
That is a good point, Ricky.
That's a good point.
But that
Yep.
goes back to my Colin Sleep point. Because if he was that high on top Watson, if you saw the potential, why would you not play Watson thinking towards the future and trying to get on the good side of the guy that you want to stay on the roster?
Because
Rather than
Pop's
go
a
to
different
Sleep.
guy now than he probably was 3 months ago. I think that's
Different guy than he was at Syracuse week when we had to play a backup?
Mike Hardy brought this up. You don't want to have to rely on a redshirt freshman that hasn't taken a snap unless you absolutely have to. But he has now seen what Pop is capable of on the field. He has the proof of it. And if he's going to have to pick between a guy that has some serious upside and a guy that he recruited, right, over a guy that he has now seen 2 years worth and for about, 6 games played really well, and then everything else was either a mixed bag or just not very good. I don't know why he wouldn't go with the guy that he openly recruited and has shown that he's got some serious upside, again, with a roster that is going to have some growing pains anyway.
I think what it comes down to is in the coaching staff's mind, right? And Andrew, I think your point about stability going into next year, right, and bringing drones back, because I'm not of the opinion, and I don't think I made this clear earlier, I'm not of the opinion that the coaching staff is going to run drones out of town. I don't think that. I think that drones may look elsewhere depending on what the NIL looks like. I don't think the coaching staff's running drones out based on what Pop did against UVA.
No.
Nor do I think they necessarily should, right? Because I haven't seen enough. Like, Pop looked great against Virginia. Looked fantastic. Played pretty well in relief against Duke. That's a very small sample size, right? It's a small sample size, and things can turn. And to Andrew's point, the devil you know versus the devil you don't, right? And Ricky, this builds in what you just said. 6 to 7 games of drones have been really good. The rest have been mediocre to bad, depending on where you look. Now, only the coaching staff, because they've been so tight-lipped, only the coaching staff and some of the players truly know how injured Drones was this year and whether or not his regression was solely based on just a second year as a starter, slump films out on you, offense isn't playing well, you're not playing well. How much of it is that versus how much of it is, yeah, he's been like, maybe he wasn't as injured as he was in the latter half of the season, but he was banged up a good bit this year. If he gets healthy, gets right, can he be the quarterback that he was the back half of the 22-23 season? Or 23-24, sorry. I don't know, right? I don't know the answer to that. So I don't think they're going to run drones out of town. And this is a year where Pry has to get it right. And I think you would rather be in a situation where you have drones, who has been in the offense, a lot of starting experience at this point. You've seen what he can do at his best. And then you have a promising young guy in Pop, on the other hand, that you can go to, right? If you decide to start Drones and things aren't going well and you pull him and go to Pop, maybe that saves your job in a make or break year 4 and you have that opportunity versus going with Pop, which might be a situation they're in anyway, but let's play this out. Drones gone. You push him out, which I don't think they're going to do. Let's play it out. They push Drones out, and here's Pop, right? Okay, we've seen a game and a half out of Pop Watson. Half game when he came in relief, not great. First game as a starter looked really good. Full week of practice with the ones. Against a bad UVA defense. Does the coaching staff think that healthy Kyron Drones could have done the same thing against UVA on Saturday, leading to the same results? If the answer for the coaching staff is yes, we think Drones could have done the same thing, then I don't think it's a slam dunk that they're like, oh yeah, we're popping you in. Lack of a better term. We're sliding you as QB1. I do think that this is a situation, though, if Drones comes back, if he does come back, because I think the staff's going to try to keep him. If he does come back and you have Pop Watson, you're able to keep him in the fold, that's fantastic. By the way, guys, what are Pop Watson's options going to be? We talked about what Drones' options are going to be. Are we absolutely sure Pop Watson is going to get like a bunch of P4 offers?
No.
He's 5. He's right. So he's 5, let's call it what it is. He's undersized, right? 5'9", 5'10". He is shifty. He can throw. Can he throw consistently against good ACC defenses? Like, what's the answer to that? We don't know, right? I don't want to hold the Duke game against him, and he had some really good throws against Duke. He also had a couple really bad ones, bad decisions, right? I don't want to hold that against him because of just how everything played out, how he had to come into the game, all that stuff. But I mean, how is this going to look against good ACC defenses? We don't know the answer to that. When he is like the starting quarterback, we don't know the answer, right? And I think people are going to look at Pop and they're going to look at his size and they're going to say, what is his best case scenario? Okay, well, his elite best case scenario is he's Kyler Murray. The realistic best case scenario is that he's like a better version of Castellanos. I think that's like the more realistic best case scenario for him given his size. Boston College basically said good riddance to Castellanos. And before the year, right, I've been pretty open that I don't think Castellanos is very good. But BC was pretty happy like 3/4 of the way through a year with a bowl game on the line saying, yep, see you later, and running him out of town. They were okay with that, making a quarterback change. There are not a lot of quarterbacks at the P4 level who are standing at 5'9", 5'10". I think the offers are going to be G5. And okay, is he going to go to a starting job at a G5 level? If you're Virginia Tech and you're Brent Pry and you're trying to win in year 4, if this is like best case scenario, a really good G5 quarterback, because by the way, Grant Wells, he wasn't a really good G5 quarterback. He was a decent G5 quarterback. Are we saying that like him saying good riddance to a G5 quarterback is going to make or break his year 4? I think he's got bigger issues if that's the case. So I don't know how this is going to play out. I think Pop should have an opportunity in the spring if Drones comes back. I don't think it should be a slam dunk. I think the staff's going to try to keep both of them, and we'll just see. We'll see. It's going to be a young roster next year, so I understand Ricky's point about play the young guy with the young roster, have the growth, but I also understand it's a small sample size, and we don't know for sure. Pop looked great against UVA, but we just don't know for sure.
One thing, just to chime in on that really quick, we may not have a very large sample size with Pop Watson. We do have a pretty good sample size with Kyron Drones. And take that for what it's worth.
Ricky, you're not wrong. And again, I'm essentially purely playing devil's advocate. It's hard for me to feel like I have a truly informed opinion on a player who I've seen play 2 games, game and a half, but the coaching staff has watched practice every day. That's why you have a coaching staff. You trust them to make the right decision about personnel, especially personnel that is giving you more behind closed doors than they're giving the public, right? That's why they practice every day. That's why they do weeks and weeks of spring camp. But for all the points that Mike made before, whether it be the sample size, whether it be the physical size,
Pause.
if Kyron Jones and Pop wants it, go on the open market. Kyron Jones is going to have a heck of a better offer list.
Shut the hell up, Mike.
Drones would have a better offer list. Yes, I think more teams, more big time programs would be interested in drones than Pop Watson because of a number of factors. Yes,
which is why. Jesus Christ, man! This podcast. Which is why
if that doesn't get the comment section jumping, I don't know what is.
That was a layup. I don't know. Hoop in the harm. You know.
Just trying to keep a straight face while doing this thing, and you guys make it tough. My fucking Colin Coward mantra or little speech is over now. Either way, I just have a hard time believing, based on the lack of faith that they had before, that Watson's going to be the guy. Mike, you're like, oh, we're not going to push drones out. In this era, pursuing Watson staying would effectively be pushing drones out. Given that Watson's going to have some sort of other options, you're going to have to pay him a lot. I don't think Kyron Drone's going into what I think is his final year of eligibility.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Has any interest in competing with Pop Watson. So by pushing Watson and saying anything resembling open competition is pushing him out. So if I was the odds makers, here's what I would say. And again, that doesn't mean this is right. This is what I think. Your favorite for starting quarterback next year is probably neither Pop Watson nor Kyron Drones. Someone else who plays somewhere else currently. Then Drones, then Watson. And I'd put Drones and other as more of the horse race than Watson. Because I think that they have such little faith in Watson that they would still pursue another guy to compete with him to start. And if someone else is giving Watson a better offer than that, I think he's out too. Again, we'll see how the dust settles. This is an extremely imperfect and delicate situation that Brent Pry has to walk the tightrope on in a year that, as we mentioned before, could be his last if it doesn't go right.
Perfect comment that it kind of
Jimmy
encapsulates
Cleveland.
my point. Should
Jimmy.
Pry trust Kyron Drones to save his job? It's a very, very pertinent question, boys.
Devil you know or devil you don't. That's the decision Brent Pry has to make.
The devil you know has gotten you 6-6 2 years in a row.
I don't
saying.
know, man. I still think a fully healthy Kyron Drones gets you further than a fully
5'9"
healthy
redshirt freshman that played
5'9". Yeah. I mean, that's what now. I don't know that 100% certain, but like that's what I think. I also think, to Caleb Fields' comment that we should throw on the screen, I also think that the bigger issue, sorry, Ricky, I double-clicked on you. I also think that the bigger issue for Pry is not who his quarterback is. It's who his assistant coaches are.
Yep.
And that's something that, because it obviously directly affects, how are these players going to develop and what does that look like? The conversation I want to have now that we've beaten the quarterback horse to death is, does Virginia Tech keep both of their coordinators heading into next season? Do they keep both the offensive and defensive coordinator? We had a conversation before, I think it was before Clemson on this podcast, the three of us, where we were discussing if the team, if the program were to make coaching staff changes, who are you firing, right? Because every group has been so inconsistent. Who are you pulling the trigger on? I think now with the full 12 game sample size, I'm ready to do this. And I don't, let me say this off the top. I don't like calling for people's jobs. That's not something I enjoy doing. A lot of people on social media seem to like relish it. I don't enjoy calling for people to lose their jobs. Not something I enjoy doing. But also, like, we're not affiliated with Virginia Tech in any way. I have no dog in the fight in terms of like if this guy keeps his job or he doesn't. I would love for the staff to, I've said a million times, I'd love for the staff to work out and win a million games and everything to be dandy and hunky dory. Would love it. It's just not reality at this point through 3 seasons. So which assistant coaches do you guys believe are losing their jobs? Because I have a few, okay? I have a few in mind, and I'm ready to stake my claim if I had to go to the book, right, and talk about odds, who's keeping their job, who's losing it. I'll tell you who I think is keeping their job. I think Tyler Bowen is keeping his job. I think the offensive coordinator is keeping his job. I think there's been enough this year. I think you get the banged up starting quarterback situation. You had your best offensive player, Bayshell Tootin, who was not healthy through the middle of your ACC schedule. I think Tyler Bowen's keeping his job. I do not think Chris Marv is keeping his. I know there's the whole thing, Pry coached Marv, and Marv has coached under Pry, and all this stuff. I get it. A lot of history there with him being a player under Pry, then coaching under Pry, and then now being a major coordinator under Pry, all that stuff. I get it. But the linebacking core was a mess this year again. Very up and down, most inconsistent group on the entire defense. Marv coaches the linebackers. The defense still has the issues, and we saw it on Saturday against UVA, still has the issues like leaky explosive plays. They give a bunch of explosive plays against Duke. Last couple games have been very up and down. There was a lot of talent on this defense, and I think everybody saw what it could be, right, at its best with all the talent. But I think out of the two coordinators, if I had to place a bet, my bet is on Chris Marv being the one to go.
I don't think either of them are going anywhere.
Bowen stays, Marv goes.
I think Marv's unit in totality was at least statistically better than the offense. As far as season statistics go, do I think that Marv did a good job coordinating this year? No, I don't. But I have a hard time feeling that Pry is going to axe either of those guys. I think your changes are probably are going to be lower on the totem pole. I just can't imagine him letting either of those guys go.
I could certainly see a scenario also. I know it sounds like I'm playing both sides of the coin. I could certainly also see a scenario where both coordinators return. That's been my stance all year. But I think with how the last couple games have gone, would not surprise me. Certainly would not shock me. Definitely would not surprise me if Marv's the one to go. Position coaches. Man. I think Ron Crook, and look, I made this point before the UVA game on social media. Virginia Tech fans were ready to pack Joe Rudolph's bags for him because of the way he left for Notre Dame. And you look at how Notre Dame's offensive line, again, better personnel, but you see how Notre Dame's offensive line is blocking week over week and how that offense runs and how those offensive linemen look under Joe Rudolph. And he was your best assistant coach hire when you got the Virginia Tech job, and you replaced him, no offense to Ron Crook, but you replaced him with a journeyman at a lot of FCS stops and group of 5 stops. I get it was a tough time in the cycle, but your response wasn't a power conference proven offensive line coach in the like of Joe Rudolph. It was a journeyman guy who had kind of bounced all over the place. Crook obviously is a good enough coach to keep getting jobs, right? So I don't think it's anything against him in that regard. But I think when you look comparatively speaking to what you let walk out the door in Joe Rudolph and what you replaced him with and how the offensive line has looked, he's the one I point to at this point. Even with the offensive line feeling like it got better throughout the year, I think there's enough to potentially make a change there. Otherwise, I don't know where the change is made. Special teams was good this year. I know Stu Holt had a rough 2023 season, but special teams I thought was a lot better this year. Offensive and defensive position coaches, you firing J.C. Price? No. Yeah, you want to fire Derek Jones? That's one I would be very, very surprised about. Not with the way I thought the safeties developed this year, even with, an up and down couple weeks against Clemson and Duke.
Well, that's Prelo. You have to remember that.
Well, that's I guess that's Prelo, and the corners would be Derek Jones. But I don't think you're firing either one of them. So I don't. Still stands. Comment stands. I don't know who you're firing.
Yeah, it seems like Crook is the easiest one to give the boot. Stu Holt probably being next. I actually was talking with a buddy of mine, Stephen Newman, about the Derek Jones performance that he's had this year. Mansour Delane's kind of regression at times this year, I think, caused some concern for a lot of folks. And I'm not saying that Derek Jones did a bad job, but the corners were not as strong this year as I think I expected them to be. I'm not entirely concrete in that take, but just on a gut level, I don't feel like the corners played as well as I expected them to, specifically Delane. And to be quite honest, Delane really hasn't grown a ton since he first burst onto the scene at Virginia Tech. It seems like he's still pretty inconsistent as a cover guy. And I think that's rather concerning. I don't know that Prelo is getting fired, but I do think the safety play has been extremely up and down. Mose Phillips, it seems like he's out of position quite a bit. Jalen Jones, kind of the same deal. It'll be nice to see them get some new blood in there. I think Quentin Reddish has a great skill set. Whether or not he's able to develop that into being a reliable contributor remains to be seen. But this is, a conversation, Mike, like you mentioned, we had weeks ago where we're not really sure what the easy positions to kind of make a change are. And that's why I think we're probably going to only end up with maybe one or at the most two coaches that will not be returning on this staff.
And the other thing too is like, I feel like in some cases it's change for the sake of change to almost appease the Twitter mob, and I don't know that that's always the best decision either.
Well, and the other part of it too, especially for guys like Bowen or Marv, is you have to be, if you're going to make that change prior to what may be your last season as the head coach, you've got to be absolutely sure that you're making an upgrade.
Right.
And if you're just making a change, as you mentioned, Mike, just to make a change, that doesn't really do you any good. And it's going to cost you money because a bunch of these assistants just got extensions last offseason.
Right.
So if you're going to let go of one of these guys, you're going to have to make sure that there are available folks on the market that that you can go poach that will be a definitive upgrade at that position. I'm not sure if there are many upgrades available, quite honestly, given where Virginia Tech is as a program right now, given how cash-strapped everyone's going to be. We know Virginia Tech is certainly going to be cash-strapped. I just don't see a ton of change happening on this coaching staff right now.
Those are the two big picture items I wanted to cover tonight. Look, great that Virginia Tech got the win. Bowl game coming up. We'll see where Tech ends up. I saw CBS Sports had a Fenway Bowl projection again, which would be a fun destination, I think, for Virginia Tech fans going up to Boston. But it's against Tulane, which I would be surprised if they put Virginia Tech against Tulane again, right? Same place, different face thing.
I just don't see it.
I don't see it either.
I don't see that at all.
I don't see it either.
Before we wrap up, just one last thing on the QBs. If Jones is healthy, do you start Pop Watson for the bowl game? Also, do you do that for other positions? I don't think Kyron's going to be healthy for the bowl game, so I don't think this is really going to be a question. I think his leg is pretty banged up right now, so I would anticipate Watson starting unless he's in the portal. In which, if that's the case, I mean, and Colin Schlee's not ready. Davi Belfort, come on down. Like Virginia Tech will be on their 4th string quarterback in whatever bowl game they end up.
Worse than the 2021 bowl game.
Jeez.
Shout
out to Taj Bullock. Taj time, baby.
Oh
Taj
God.
time. Actually, now is a good time. Speaking of Taj time, to get a Taj Bullock season recap.
While Andrew's pulling that up, I wanted to bring up a couple things. First off, I think lost in this pretty mediocre season has been 2 incredible individual performances, which we have referenced on the podcast, but I want to give them a shout out here before we wrap up. Antoine Powell-Ryland, 3 sacks in this game. Just an outstanding year as a pass rusher. 16 sacks, 19 TFLs. He's really improved from when he got to campus to the end of this year. He's a guy that definitely could have gone pro last year and chose to come back and improve his draft stock, and I definitely think that he did. Also, another huge game from Bashal Tootin in this one. His run there in the 4th quarter kind of put any doubt away after UVA was able to have 2 straight touchdowns. In the second half, he goes off for 124. Bashal had his 2nd 1,000-yard season this year, 1,100 yards, 15 rushing touchdowns. Just an incredible season from both of those guys. Last thing, as you guys know, I was supposed to be in Blacksburg for this game, but couldn't because of work. So I watched this game on the ACC network. By God, the production from the ACC network, it stinks. It is bad. The camera work is bad. The production is bad. You get the same commercials like 3 times in a row. I mean, my fiance, who's certainly not an avid football fan, is sitting here watching the same ESPN NBA commercial for like 45 seconds. And that's just an awful look from a network that's owned by ESPN for a casual fan to see that. It's rather embarrassing.
Rick, to your point, absolutely. I think during our preview, I mentioned something along the lines of this could be a convincing win if it's a take a bow Bashal Tootin game.
Yep.
You know, a final display of excellence from an individual on what has been an otherwise mediocre team. And God knows how mediocre that team would look without him.
Oh, God. They're not making a bowl game, that's for damn sure.
Yeah. I mean, they barely made one with him. One of the great rushers in the storied football history of the university. So
that's got a history of a ton of running backs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So to him,
he's as good as any of them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's, best since David Wilson is not a really questionable statement.
Yeah, I mean, and Khalil Herbert's the only guy, right, that gives him any run for his money. But I think what he's done is a little bit better than Khalil. But him and Khalil Herbert are the only 2 guys since David that have been even remotely close to this good. And I would say Bashal's probably a top 5 back in school history, given how he's run the last 2 years.
Oh,
and that's saying something.
Without a doubt. And I think to an extent, over the course of at least like the last year and a half, season and a half at least, we've gotten grown accustomed to it. Like it's just a given that the running backs could have come in, and that's going to be a huge aspect of your offense. But we saw against Clemson, and at other times when Tootin wasn't either fully healthy or fully available, or even more mind-bogglingly, they just chose not to use him at various points. That was more last season than this season. Like, life with Malachi Thomas, who's not like horrible, but I think he is like your replacement level ACC starting running back. Probably worse a little bit. Like, that's what life looks like otherwise. So the offensive line could take a big step forward next year, and it could be you might not notice because the running back talent in the backfield is going to be worse. So to him, all we can say to Bashal Tootin is thank you. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for playing in a game that few would blame you for sitting out in.
Yep.
And if you sit out the bowl game, you have my permission. Like, please go do what's best for you to do. Go at a certain point, right? Like, it's better to. That's what I think I said it aloud during the game, which is a bad thing to say aloud. I'm like, it would just truly break my heart if he got any sort of injured. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that would be heartbreaking. And to have another Hokie's name come up on the draft board, it's probably worth more than the result of the bowl game, if we're being honest. So, to Bashal Tootin, we say thank you. That's pretty much all I got on that.
18 for 124, 2 touchdowns.
We need the Taj Bullock season recap, Andrew. Did you get that
oh my
pulled up?
gosh, yes. I think I exited out of it.
Oh my god.
We'll go back.
Hurry up. Mike's got another pod to go to.
Okay, give me one sec. We were just here.
You got plenty of time for this one. I'm
Joey's
not
already,
going
told
anywhere.
you to kick
Before
rocks.
before the Taj Bullock season recap, a quick shout out to Counts Family Pharmacy and Home Field Apparel. Thank you for your support the entire season. We genuinely appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that's been listening all season long. It's been a crazy ride. It's not quite over yet. We'll see how the bowl game stuff goes. But all right, Andrew, what you got?
Yes, thank you to Counts Family Pharmacy, the official pharmacy and the official sponsor of the Taj Bullock season recap. It was a
Good charge Jeremy extra for that.
Yes, please. Here you go. It's going to be one more shot of Jameson, Jeremy. It was an up and down season for Taj Bullock. He didn't have that many actual opportunities. Through 29 passes, 13 of which came in week 1 against Ohio State, where despite completing 9 of them for 68 yards, I guess Akron figured it was time to go in a different direction. They then turned back to him, though, and it was a homecoming of sorts at Rutgers.
Ooh.
The East Orange native, 3 for 3 for 13 yards. The real highlight, if you will, of the season came against Eastern Michigan, where he completed 2 passes for 36 total yards. One of them was for 20, though, in a narrow victory for the Zips. And yeah, he played a little bit. So the total count there, 176 yards on an impressive 72.4 completion percentage. He also ran the ball
Sample
54
size.
times. They were bringing him into these games, mostly as kind of like a gadget play guy. Rushed for 142 yards.
If any touchdowns, Andrew.
8 rushing touchdowns.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah,
why did you
like,
lead with that? What are we doing? Way to bury the lead, Andrew.
Yeah, he rushed for 8 touchdowns.
Jesus.
He was
Mostly,
sounds like he was a Wildcat guy. Yeah.
Yeah, Wildcat, red zone. Longest rush of the year was for 14 yards. So
Yeah.
Hey, it doesn't matter when you pop
So,
8 times.
like,
Yeah.
and
Tim
who
Tebow.
is it? It's old Joe Moorhead at Akron, right?
I was gonna say if Joe
I
Moorhead
think-
can't fix you as a passer, you're gonna go pro in something other than sports.
Yeah. Having watched no film on this, it's not hard to imagine a Taj Bullock tush push in Akron, Ohio. But the Zips overall, did they make a bowl game?
No,
Survey
they were
says
horrible.
no. 4-0.
They were horrible. Yeah, they were really bad. Yeah.
Beat Colgate, though.
Big win.
Oh, don't poo-poo it. Beating Colgate is better than beating UVA, right? Don't poo-poo it.
It is beating Colgate better for the Akron program than beating Virginia is for Virginia Tech. There's a whole nother podcast dedicated to that.
Oh, yeah. Jeez.
Be getting deep into MAC football talk at that
I
point,
saw
which is
a,
something I don't want to do.
I saw something on X earlier today. As of right now, Tony Elliott has the lowest win percentage amongst all P4 coaches.
Hate to see it,
Yes,
but really,
over the course of the last 3 years, for any team that's been coached by the same team over those 3 years, which what would that suggest? They should fire him. But Mike, true or false? UVA has a Carlo Williams problem.
yeah, they do. They also have a Des Kitchings problem, which I think Tony Elliott will be escorting his offensive coordinator out of town, would be my guess. Yeah. So.
Anthony Calandria landing conference.
Where's he from?
Anthony Calandria.
I mean, we know he's Monticello Manziel, but where is he from?
He is from. I used to know this. He's from Florida. That's right. He is from St. Petersburg,
we'll end up
Florida.
At like FAU
Central Florida.
or something.
Central Florida.
Oh yeah, they're gonna have a new coach.
Yep. UCF, FAU, FIU. He could play some really bad.
Malzahn was like,
FIU.
I'm out.
FIU. He could play some really bad football if he wants to.
The Panthers. Wishing nothing but the best to Anthony Calandria, who was always an exciting player to watch. So exciting that they wouldn't play him in a must-win.
Monticello Manziel. All right, guys. I'm good. We'll be back at some point soon. I guess we'll take probably
transfers, all that stuff.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of transfer news
here
in the next week. So
yeah, we'll take a few days.
Yeah.
Get that sorted out.
We deserve a few days, I think.
I'm going to Myrtle Beach next weekend for my bachelor party.
Playing some golf, Rick?
Hey.
Are you playing are you playing like the Monuments one where
I don't know what course we're playing. My best man booked it, but I've been told that it is a relatively nice course. I don't have that kind of money, guys.
Well, your groomsmen should be paying for you, but it's neither here nor there.
They are. However, I'm trying not to screw the shit out of them.
Yeah, it's fair.
Because they're also paying for my meals and paying my share of the house that we're staying at. So
yeah,
Ricky wants to go to Pebble Beach, or else you guys are failures as groomsmen. Come on.
Oh yeah. Beautiful. All right, guys. We'll be back soon.
Done.
We're done. Go Hokies.